Hi, I'm Pete. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're back in the workshop. I recently got this Makita track saw. Today, we're going to go through the top 5 tips that I found on YouTube that helped me get started using this track saw. Now, let's get started and let's have some fun. You might have seen my earlier videos detailing the receipt of my new Makita track saw. Since it's been delivered, I've spent many hours on YouTube watching videos, getting tips and tricks on how to best use the saw. Here are the top 5 tips that I found to help me get started with this Makita track saw. Tip number 1, how to connect multiple rails for long rip cuts. One of the best features of any track saw is its ability to easily break down sheet goods. I bought 2 55-inch tracks that'll need to be connected together to cut an 8-foot sheet of plywood. This Makita connector kit holds the tracks together. The kit includes these 2 bars, 4 set screws, and an Allen wrench. The shorter bar is placed on top of the longer bar, centered between the 2 nibs on the longer bar. The connector bars are then slid into the slot on the bottom of the rail. Once both rails are engaged, you can now install the set screws. The set screws should only be tightened finger tight. You don't want to over tighten them as they may distort the rails. I use a 4-foot level as a straight edge to make sure the rails are perfectly aligned. Once I'm through making long rip cuts, I loosen the set screws and slide the connector bars over into one rail. With the connecting bars now 100% in just one rail, I now retighten the screws, and this makes for a storage area for the connecting kit. This is a really great solution. I no longer have to remember where did I put that connector kit, and I no longer lose set screws. And the connector kit is always handy when I need it. Track saw tip number 2, how to trim the zero clearance splinter guard. This tip works best if you have 2 rails connected together. Make sure the saw is fully supported on the rail before starting your first plunge cut. Proceed along the entire length of the rail, stopping your cut about 8 inches from the end. All but the first and last 8 inches of splinter guard have now been trimmed. Here's how you trim those 2 final pieces of splinter guard. Loosen the screws on the connector kit and swap the positions of the guide rails. The 2 uncut sections of splinter guard will now lie in the center of the connected rails. Retighten the screws on the connector kit and flip the rails over, and you can now trim the remaining pieces of the splinter guard. The splinter guards are now perfectly trimmed on both guide rails. Track saw tip number 3, apply a coat of wax to the guide rails and the base plate of the saw. Something that I noticed with my saw right out of the box is that it didn't slide easily along the guide rail. It was particularly bad when performing a bevel cut. I knew that paste wax works wonders on some of my other tools, so I decided to give it a shot here. Now that's much better. Tip number 4. Add saw placement markings to the guide rails. I got this tip from Peter Millard's 10-minute workshop. I'll post a link to his channel in the description below. The Makita track saw has 2 adjusting screws in its base that hold it steady in the guide rail. Both adjusting screws need to engage the base for accurate cutting. It's not always easy to keep track of those adjusting screws while making a cut. So I like to mark the position of the saw on the guide rails once I know those 2 set screws are in the right position. These pencil markings on the guide rail will tell me exactly where the saw needs to be to start the cut. The same holds true at the other end of the guide rail when you're finishing the cut. If you advance the saw too far on the guide rail, the set screw may disengage and you lose the accuracy of your cut. So once again, I place markings on the guide rail, which tells me where I need to stop the saw for a clean and accurate cut. Track saw tip number 5, essential accessories for improved accuracy and performance. There are 2 accessories that I think are essential for any track saw user. The first is a robust and accurate guide rail square. I'm using the GRS 16 from TSO Products. It fits the Makita guide rails perfectly. A quality guide rail square is the fastest and easiest way to get perfect 90-degree cuts. The GRS 16 from TSO Products was a great help in my recent floating shelf project. I'll post a link to TSO Products in the description. Another accessory that I find to be very helpful is a ratcheting guide rail clamp. These clamps do an excellent job on difficult cuts. These clamps came from Powertec. Again, I'll put a link in the description. This concludes the video of 5 track saw tips for the Makita track saw. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please hit like and please remember to subscribe. Thanks again for watching and thanks again for visiting my channel.